I'm Wendy Buckley. I'm Client Director at Carbon Footprint and also Chair of the Sustainable Business Network in North Hampshire. This is a recording from our online meeting on the road to sustainable recovery from COVID-19 that we held on the 23rd of October, when a lot of our delegates were still in various locations, home-based, as well as within the workplace. We hope you enjoy the recording.
We have quite a full programme this morning. We're going to try and get this into an hour because otherwise I think everyone gets a bit zoomed and teamed out. First of all, we'll do some quick updates on the market and legal aspects. And then we have Jack Kennedy from Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council, who will talk about this area's recovery and green plan. After that, delighted that my colleague Joel Fernandez will be presenting on homework footprint, which is very topical during these times. And finally, our case study is presented by Mike Kerridge of Lockton about a corporate business based in London and their approach to the pandemic and managing their green and carbon management throughout. I should say, my name's Wendy Buckley and I'm Client Director over here at Carbon Footprint and also the Chair of the North Hants Sustainable Business Network. This is going to be a whistle-stop tour through some of the things happening over the last few months. It was the end of February when we last got together. And really, I think what you can see from the screen here are two of the things that interplay here, two images of two gentlemen. The gentleman on the left, I think many of you will know, this is our MD, John Buckley, in his home setup when we were in the depths of lockdown. He's actually got quite a good DSE setup there, innovating with a few boxes and things like that to try and make it work. And I think innovation was really the key in that difficult period that we all lived through. And it's not just innovation and making sure the desk worked, it's innovation in all the things in business that we did and our approaches to sustainability. The chap on the right is obviously Sir David Attenborough, and throughout this time, and that image there is courtesy of BBC, is the emphasis on the environment. Through lockdown, I think we all experienced cleaner air, and it gave us some time to think about what we need to do to make sure that we properly address the climate emergency that we face. The little graph there shows the visits to our own website, carbonfootprint.com. I've shown this type of graph before, and you can see a little bit, perhaps a little bit of a reduction in the interest top level from the website over those periods of lockdown, but you can see that kicking back up again. And I think this almost holds a mirror up to what's going on out there and all the things that Sir David Attenborough and many environmentalists and economists for that matter tell us about. So really that's the background on that. What was going on? Let's have a look. At a macro level, this chap here with a really interesting haircut made some pretty big pledges. And this is on the Build Back Better became Build Back Greener. And just a whistle-stop tour through this, some of the headline grabbing statements there were seen to be a little bit lacking in ambition, particularly on the biodiversity. And I'll let you read that in your own time because we're already doing a lot of that anyway. When it comes to electricity generation, with some promises about domestic dwellings being supplied by wind energy. Bear in mind that that's only a third of the UK's electricity consumption, so there's a way to go there in terms of decarbonisation. Things to look out for, there's currently a consultation in place about levies on gas, so-called green gas. Doesn't make it carbon neutral, I understand. If you want to have some commentary on that, please go to the BEIS website or gov.uk and have a look at that. The aim there is for domestic dwellings to no longer have gas from 2025. It's not so long away. Final bit on there really is about net zero. Obviously, our country has an ambition and a commitment to net zero by 2050. The science-based target is trying to define this. It's not in place yet, and obviously it's for their own needs and some for that initiative. This, I understand, is going to permit the use of carbon offsetting with particular certified projects to achieve those levels. Let's move on. Brexit, Obviously lots of negotiations going on, and it's not for me to cover that here. We can all read there what the framework controls are, issues about particulates, etc. The thing that's most concerning me at the moment with this is the lack of an environmental watchdog to replace the EU on Brexit. I think there's quite a few issues there of who's going to be checking up on what we're doing. So that's quite a thing. We'd love to see the levels of fines and things that companies are facing. I know we're all trying to do the right thing. It seems a shame that very often here on these pages we see the water utility companies, and this is no different here. You can see you've got six-figure sums being paid out by these companies. The one difference here, actually, we do have a finance business in there that perhaps we haven't seen before. There seems to be increased amounts of uptake for the enforcement undertakings, which you'll remember is the way that companies can avoid a prosecution. Instead, they pay money basically to make the area better, that usually goes to a local charity. So you can see that some really good initiatives are being supported via this. Perhaps if I were being a little bit cynical, I'd say, well, yes, and those companies would enjoy a little bit of positive PR from it. But that is the money's actually going to those areas, means that obviously it does directly benefit those areas and not go into central government coffers, as I understand it. Another comment there on waste. Some fines have gone out for that, again using enforcement undertakings, and this is part of the producer pays initiative. Okay, so you can see some figures there. What I might say with those is they look quite modest compared to the figures we've seen just on the slide previously for the water companies. So how much of a deterrent that is, I don't know. Some final things on this page that have changed. The greenhouse gas emissions trading is going to have to transition to having a UK variant. If you are, and I know some of you on the call there are in the EU ETS, that's going to have to change over. If you are holding credits on an account, obviously from Brexit, those are no longer going to be there, so you should have a little think about that. I think the other two issues there, social distancing on waste transfer notes, hopefully that's an obvious thing that you'll be doing as part of your social distancing. Also changed there about the treatment of food waste. So I'm going to leave you to read that in your own time and follow up with the links that are provided. Now, I wish I hadn't got to say this again, but ESOS is still rearing its head, and you can see from this letter this is an enforcement letter from the Environment Agency that was passed to us a few days ago, that despite finishing in December last year, there still are a good number of businesses that have not complied with ESOS. If you do get one of these letters, then you will need to respond to it. It hasn't gone away because of all the events of 2020. The fines are very big if you don't comply. And these can be as much as £40,000 plus daily rate that you remain non-compliant with the legislation. So ESOS, again. Other things going on, we are still fighting our war with plastic. Over recent times, obviously that's tricky because we need to be able to balance things up with hygiene and safety. Whether we've gone too far or not is not for me to say on this call here, but we do have the ambitions of zero avoidable waste by 2050 that we need to hit. We are some way off of that. However, we have seen some important changes this month with plastic straws and cotton buds and stirrers going out. So the way is moving forward there. The first streamlined energy and carbon reports are going out. You'll remember these are for all large entities, and I think people on the call know enough about this. You can see the criteria there if you need to just remind yourself of what those are. Obviously, over the period of lockdown, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak kindly gave a stay of execution in submission of the annual reports and accounts, but I think that's now coming to an end. So the first SECR reports are now coming out. It is being enforced by the Conduct Committee of Financial Reporting. We don't know what the fines are against this at the moment, though the Chancellor is short of a few bob at the moment, so I suspect that that will be coming in. I've just put a little link in there, not to tell you what the criteria are, but also to show you the format of the reporting. If we had loads of time today, we'd run the video of that, but that link is in the pack here for you to follow up to see exactly what that looks like in the Directors' Report section of your accounts. Here are some useful links at the end here that you'll be able to have a look at in your own time. I'm now going to just put back up here the agenda for this morning, and I would now like to hand over to Jack Kennedy of Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council.
So my name's Jack Kennedy. I'm the Economic Development Manager for Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council. Generally, what economic development means, or what we take it to mean, is around supporting businesses within our borough to grow, supporting startups to flourish, attracting new businesses via inward investment. But it's also about the sort of economic growth aspects, and this is where I think there's going to be lots of crossover with the sustainability agenda. Saw in the as people were sort of saying where they're from, seems to be a huge range of places, so it's probably worth me introducing the borough a bit as well for anyone who doesn't know Basingstoke and Deane. So obviously we're based in North Hampshire, the largest town of Hampshire. We've got around 180,000 in terms of a population for the borough, nearly 8,000 businesses based in Basingstoke and Deane. But we've got ambitious plans for growth going forward, so that includes things like a new housing development called Manydown, which is going to be to the west of the town, which would bring potentially around 10,000 new homes. So it's like a whole new community being added onto Basingstoke and Deane. There's plans for a new hospital, redevelopment of our business parks and our leisure parks. So there's a lot going on, a lot of infrastructure building, a lot of change potentially coming down the plan, and obviously all of that intersects with how do we make sure that's done in a environmentally friendly way. But today I'm mainly going to talk about our economic recovery framework and how that fits in with our plans for clean growth in the borough. So if I move on to the next slide, then it's worth potentially giving a bit of economic context, because obviously when we talk about recovery, there needs to be something that we're recovering from. And one of the most sort of obvious indicators of what's going on in the borough is around unemployment. So we've seen the highest number of claimants for unemployment benefits since February 1994. So that's a 25-year high in September, the last data that came out last month. This is way higher than we've seen at any point during sort of the last 25 years, way higher than the sort of 2008, 9, 10 kind of recession. And this, you could say this is at the early point of the impact that we're going to see during this pandemic on employment. So there's obviously some significant concerns for us in this area. One of the particular areas or issues that we're most concerned about is the rise in unemployment amongst the 18 to 24-year-old age category. As you can see, sort of employment has stayed fairly steady. The rate of unemployment across all age categories, it's around 4.5% over the last few months, but the proportion of 18 to 24-year-olds has grown within that, and we are now above both the Hampshire and South East rates, which typically that's not been the case. It's not actually necessarily a little loosening of the labour market in Basingstoke was never going to be a bad thing, because actually it's been one of the issues that businesses have had being based here is how tight the labour market is, the availability of skills and talent. But of course, this is going way beyond that little loosening, and it's a concern. So one of our considerations is how do we get people back into work, but how do we get them back into the right kind of work for the future? I mean, linked to that in terms of jobs, this graph here shows the number of people that are on the job retention scheme, or the furlough scheme, as most people call it. So 25,500 people at the last data that was shared by HMRC in Basingstoke and Deane, and that's roughly a quarter of the economically active population. So that's a significant proportion of people, and obviously the concern there is that those people don't go back into jobs at the end of the furlough scheme, which is ending in about 8 days' time, and the concern for a long period was that those 25,500 people would then be looking for new work, and how do we find the right kind of careers and jobs for them? The announcement made yesterday, and some of the announcements made in previous weeks around the next iteration of the support scheme by the Chancellor, is definitely positive news for Basingstoke and Deane and for our residents. We hopefully see that there will be opportunities for them to remain in their work, even if they are doing less hours. You'll also see on this slide that in terms of job postings, they've gone down fairly significantly. And one of the interesting things about those is that the proportion of temporary versus permanent jobs has also shifted. So we're seeing a lot more recruitment for temp opportunities. So businesses obviously don't have the confidence to take on people in a permanent roles as they did 12 months ago. The type of jobs that are available in Basingstoke and Deane, that really has stayed the same throughout the kind of, I guess, lockdown period, as we call it, from about March. Nurses has always been at number one, and the sort of the following four have changed in sort of different combinations beneath that. I guess the question is, when will we start to see the type of roles that are linked to the green economy, and when are we going to see sort of the huge opportunities that can bring to a borough like Basingstoke and Deane, and how quickly can we see the top 5 job postings being radically different to the sort of traditional careers that we're seeing here, and that's one of the things that we're very interested in. Now, town centre is quite an interesting thing. Like many town centres across the areas where you live in, I'm sure they felt quite different impacts. For anyone who knows Basingstoke, you know that there's roughly kind of 3 parts to the town centre. We have the malls area, which is near the station. Then we have our Festival Place, which is our sort of our big shopping centre, and then we have our sort of more historic and independent shopping area, which is the top of town. And across all 3 areas, we've seen a significant drop in footfall. It was understandably way down back in sort of April to June time, but it's really started to recover in recent months, although we are still talking at sort of 65 to 70% kind of levels, apart from at the top of town, which is still sort of at 30% of footfall. People are using the town centre in a different way to how they were before, and they're accessing it in a different way to the way they were before. So we are seeing more and more people coming in for specific purposes. They're not spending as long as they used to in the town centre. They're coming in to buy the thing that they are after, rather than sort of browsing, using the sort of experiential purposes of a town centre. Although we have obviously the Eat Out to Help Out scheme did help in terms of getting people back out to use restaurants and bars, etc. In terms of accessing it, we're seeing, and I'll come on to this in the next slide, I think, around transport, but certainly there's been a shift in terms of usage of public transport back towards the car, and that's obviously not something that we're looking to see sustained over the next few years. So questions for us as a local authority is really around what will the town centre of the future look like? How will it impact how people access it? Will we see more people reliant on car travel because of lack of confidence in public transport? Or does it actually open up opportunities for us to think about how we lay out the town centre to provide more opportunities for people to access it via things like e-scooters, e-bikes, add more sort of infrastructure that enables people to walk to town, etc., get sustainable methods into the town centre, etc. So there's that's really interesting for us, and as part of this we are working with the University of Southampton around a future towns innovation hub, where Basingstoke is hoping to be a sort of one of the pilot areas for the work that they're doing. And the Innovations Hub is around academics collaborating with businesses and towns within the region to develop low carbon and more sustainable engineering and technology innovations to create happier, healthier and more prosperous places to live and work. And I think the focus on the pilot that might happen in Basingstoke is around a focus on advancing innovations in transport, including improvements to infrastructure design, automated and connected vehicles, electric bikes, e-scooters, etc. So to improve mobility in and around the town centre. And that's going to be something that we're taking forward, hopefully over the next few years. And really on that note, it takes me on to the next slide around transport. So just to explain this graph a bit, what it's showing is the use of road usage at both a national and Hampshire level since I think it's mid-March, 16th of March, to up until sort of 21st of September. So we're a bit sort of a month behind, but the blue line is the national usage and the red line is Hampshire. And when we say we're at 100%, that means sort of back to the baseline of a week that was taken in February in terms of usage. So a typical week that was recorded in February, and it's versus the usage is sort of compared to that. So obviously when we're back to over 100%, that means the roads are actually busier on those days than they were on the corresponding day in the week in February. What you can obviously see is back in March into April, dramatic reduction in car usage, and that was sustained for a substantial period up until the point really where schools started to reopen, non-essential stops started to reopen, pubs, restaurants, etc. And we started to see moving back to some form of, I guess, what you call normality. Now, obviously, in terms of a sustainability agenda, the drop in usage over the early period was great, and could be of significant benefit for the environment. And it's about how do we try and sustain that kind of behaviour. And the worrying thing, I guess, from our perspective, is that we've seen people returning to the car, even though actually lots of people are still working from home most days a week, and so this usage has gone back up towards somewhere near normality, even though actually a large proportion of the workforce still aren't needing to be in their cars for many days of the week. So what's that going to look like when maybe we go back to a place where we are encouraged to go back to work and be in the office? Will we revert back to using public transport like we had been previously, or is there going to be another reliance on the car going forward? And is it going to be a next generation of car users that don't want to or don't have the faith potentially in public transport in terms of safety and security and health, etc. I mean, some of the data that we have around usage of public transport in terms of use of the bus network and the train network locally, it very much backs up the fact that passenger numbers are way down. I think on the buses we're talking around sort of 50 to 60% usage versus last year. and on the trains you're talking like 25%. So it's significantly reduced compared to previous years. But yeah, for us the question is posed: how do we make most of the opportunity to capitalise on the changes in how people work and ensure that there is office accommodation locally for people that need to work from an office, but actually how do we capitalise on the fact that lots of people are used to working from home, want to continue maybe not 5 days a week but 2, 3, 4 days a week, and actually reduce their carbon emissions on the other days when they do have to go into an office. Can we make that office more local to where they live? How do we offer the flexible office space that is going to work for them? So we've gone from a point of sort of I guess what you call immediate crisis management to developing what we now see as a more long-term plan for recovery. In the beginning, our focus was really about how do we distribute the money that was being given to us by government, and we're talking we are talking in the region of £50 million worth of support in terms of business rate reliefs and direct grants to businesses that benefited sort of over 1,600 businesses in the borough. So there's a lot of work was done initially to just get that money out. But now we've got to think about, so how do we make sure that we're actually growing again? How do we stimulate the economy in the right way? And we want to do it in a way that builds upon our existing economic growth strategy, which was adopted in March 2019. And we've set out sort of 9 priority areas that have clean growth at the heart of the change. So these areas listed here, and again, as Wendy mentioned, all the slides will come out, so it gives you the opportunity to take a look yourselves. But there's 9 themes there that we see as being really important for us to consider as we work with partners to stimulate the right kind of economic growth in the region. And won't surprise you that some of them are around jobs and skills. Obviously, going back to the slides that I put up earlier, there's stuff around transport and mobility, but there's also things around how do we make sure we have the right innovation and technology, putting Basingstoke at the sort of forefront of technological change, utilising things like 5G, full fibre broadband to support people to be able to work from home in a better way. How do we make sure that we are promoting Basingstoke as a great place to work, live, and is open for business, but in the right frame of mind, that actually if you come here as a business, we're not just allowing you to do whatever you want in terms of destroying the local area or not having the right environmental credentials. And when taking this sort of idea of the framework to councillors, it was clear from their feedback that clean growth needed to be sort of at the heart of what we were doing, and really this needed to be the sort of the other side of the same coin of the climate change and air quality strategy that Basingstoke and Deane released a couple of weeks ago, and that we're still consulting on. And the two should sort of be seen together, really, as working as one rather than 2 individual things. And so there's a sort of mandation upon us to think about across all these 9 themes, how do we make sure that all of them relate to clean growth, or at least how do we make sure that there's no negative impacts based upon the actions that we'll be doing on those 9 themes. So, as I said, yeah, clean growth is essential to economic recovery. We see it as being sort of the link between the two strategies of the climate change and air quality and then economic recovery. And some of the things I put up here are just the 3 themes that come out of our climate change and air quality strategy, which, as I said, is being consulted on at the moment. But all these themes strongly relate to economic recovery. So things around transport, facilitating promoting a move to public transport, active transport, electrification of transport, things like ensuring that buildings, that we're setting ambitious targets in terms of planning policy to shape new developments in the borough, making sure that those developments I mentioned at the beginning, things like Many Down, potentially a new hospital, etc., are all developed in the right way, not going to have a negative impact on the local environment. Thinking about waste and consumption, how do we facilitate a transition to a more circular economy? So making sure that actually there's greater links between the supply chains within Basingstoke and sectors that can support each other, and we're not actually needing to import from countries across the world. I think there's a phrase in the economic recovery framework which is about focusing more on Chinham than China, and Chinham's one of our business parks for anyone that isn't based in Basingstoke. So yeah, how do we make sure that we actually have better links and businesses are utilising the skills and the goods and the services that are available here, and actually can be transported in a way that doesn't have such a damaging impact on the environment. So the point I'm going to make here is that the two strategies really have to dovetail, have to work together, and that economic growth will need to be done not sort of to the detriment of the environment or the opportunity for clean growth, but actually the phrase that was used earlier, build back better, build back greener, is going to have to be at the heart of everything that we are doing. And just coming on to my final slide, in terms of sort of posing things back to you, it's a really good opportunity for us talking to a wide range of businesses across lots of different areas. I'll be interested to know your sort of thoughts and feedback on these questions. So things around what actions are you taking as a business? Where do you think the jobs are going to be in your industries aligned to the shift to net zero carbon emissions? And really, what help do you expect to see from government, LEPs, local authorities to enable the change that needs to happen? Really would like to have your thoughts and feedback on that. My contact details are based there. There's opportunities to keep in touch with us via Twitter, LinkedIn, and our business bulletin. But yeah, that's a very quick overview of kind of what our plans are for how we stimulate economic recovery, and give you a bit of the context of where we're coming from. But yeah, the main point I wanted to make was how the clean growth is very much part of that agenda. It's not a sort of add-on or something that will happen as a byproduct. It's really at the heart of what we're going to be doing.
Jack, thank you so much. That's very fascinating and lots to have a look at when we take away these slides a little bit later. So thank you very much, Jack, for your presentation today. I'm really pleased to introduce Joel Fernandez, who is environmental consultant and climate engineer here at Carbon Footprint. Joel, over to you.
Carbon footprint of home workers. This I've called the hidden emission source of 2020. And the reason for this is that it's kind of been forgotten a bit. A lot of people have talked about how commuting has stopped and travel has gone down. And being in an office, not being in the office, has meant that you're not using energy in your offices. But of course, this just means that it's shifted to people's homes. In April, 40.1% of people who were employed worked from home due to COVID. This is on top of the 6% of people who already worked from home. So clearly there's a big shift in where the emissions are being caused. So obviously there's reduced site energy use in the service sector particularly. So that's things like your restaurants, ice rinks, everything that shut down and you didn't get to have fun with during lockdown. And for offices, this meant potential saving of 0.3 tons of CO2e per employee per year. Obviously, lockdown didn't go on for the whole year, but it kind of gives a rate of emissions. Yeah. So people were displaced, and so the home energy increased, but offices didn't just shut down. Some offices still had energy consumption. There was skeleton crews, there was security staff that still had lights on, still kept the heating going, which could potentially mean that 0.3 tons of CO2e may not have been saved. But it depends on the office, and it depends on if they've got building management systems that control, things like that. So we'll need to assess the homework footprint. So what is involved in this? If you've done a carbon footprint assessment before with us or with someone else, then you'll know that we need your energy consumption. So this will be, for a home, your electricity and most likely your natural gas. Some of you might have LPG, but in general in this country we use natural gas for heating, and yeah, so that's the main sources of emissions in your homes. So how do we think about power consumption? So you've got the obvious things like laptops, your screens and your lights which you're using, but you've also got your hot drinks that you have every day. Generally, if you're in an office, you probably make this with your colleagues or other people you work with. So you might find that you use slightly less energy in making your coffees when you're in the office, because when you're making a coffee just for yourself, you still have to put the minimum amount of water in the kettle, and you're probably heating up too much water. But anyway, I've done a rough calculation for the energy that this uses. Also done a calculation for your microwave lunch. I don't know about you, but I had better lunches when I was at home, because I had the hob at my disposal and a bigger range of food. So you might have found that your consumption due to this has actually increased. But overall, your energy consumption would cause about 0.07 tons of CO2e per year, which isn't too much. Most of the emissions you'll find come from gas use. Fortunately, at this time of year, it wasn't winter, so heating your house probably wasn't such a big deal. However, if this continued over the course of a year, you started working from home full time, then you might find that you have to heat your house in the times that you wouldn't have previously. So your emissions here for your company depend on how many people are in your house and the size of your house. I say how many people are in your house. Over lockdown, again, most people were at home, schools were out, so you probably had your house was probably at the capacity that it's normally at. However, a lot of people do live at home alone, so this should be accounted for too. So to account for this, we've assumed that there's about 25% extra gas use in heating your house over the course of a year. So that's about 3,000 kilowatt hours for a 3 to 4 bed house. And as you can see, your emissions, if you're at home alone, are about 0.6. And if you're at home with others, between 0.1 and 0.2. So with electricity, and just being at home alone, you have about 0.7 tons of CO2e over the course of a year, or if you're with others, about 0.2. But you're thinking, oh, but I'm not driving to work, so surely I'm saving a lot of emissions there. And yes, if you do drive to work every day, then you probably are saving about a ton for every year of lockdown that you're in. Obviously, we weren't in lockdown for a whole year. But if you walk, bike, get the tube, then it's not a huge saving. But yeah, this should be taken into account as well. Businesses won't see this reduction unless they measure their commuting footprint. So that's something that should be remembered there. So how do I get this information from my employees, you're thinking? And the easiest way of doing this, we found, has been to send an anonymous form to your employees. You don't want to try and get everyone's utility bills because that would be unfeasible. You probably have several thousand employees. Well, you could have up to several thousand employees as a big company, and then you'd have to send this form to everyone. Or you could just take a small sample and scale it up just to make it a little bit easier on yourself. Most of this is just an estimation anyway, so you're probably not losing too much accuracy if you did that. So overall, you shouldn't really ignore the home working footprint. It is there, and it has sort of been forgotten about by many. But we have now added homework footprints into our appraisals here at Carbon Footprint to make sure it's accounted for. It is a Scope 3 emission, so it's not you're not required to do it, but if you're keen on saving the planet, then you should take that into account. The graph in the bottom right of this slide is just a rough estimation on the office workers in the UK. So before lockdown, this suggests that the offices didn't fully shut down. So you've got your small 6% of home workers causing a small amount of emissions there, but most of your emissions from working in offices it's caused by commuting. And then during lockdown, your home worker footprint increased and the number of people commuting dropped. So you made quite a few savings there. This is just an estimation though, and this is working on per year. The overall estimated savings probably about 0.2 megatons of CO2e on a rate per year. So here are some references that I've used in this for your later consumption, and I hope you have enjoyed this presentation.
Thank you so much, Joel. That's fascinating. Our final presenter today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome for the first time presenting to the SBN, Mike Kerridge from Lockton.
My name's Mike Kerridge. I'm the head of group property for Lockton. We're a private insurance broker. Wendy, if you want to go on to slide 3 very quickly. We're a private insurance broker. Privately owned means we're independent, able to take a long-term view on what we do. We've got 8,000 people around the world that deliver insurance, risk and employee benefit advice to clients wherever they are. And the people that work for us, our associates, focus their analytical skills on risk and advice and placement in all areas of insurance and risk, including political, credit and transportation, and the list there. And we have, as a business, a turnover of 1.7 billion and a client retention rate of around 96%. Gives us the confidence that our way of working with clients is successful. But you may not have heard of us because we don't do high volume, low margin. There are people with red telephones on TV that do that very, very well, but that's not the market we work in. We're commercial insurance and commercial risk management. Wendy, if you just want to pop on the next one. In terms of my background, I'm somebody who started with a business 20 years ago. The business that I joined merged with Lockton in 2007, and I've never sold insurance. There's people in our business that do that very well. My background, civil engineering, construction and property. across a variety of different types of estate, including commercial property, aerospace, government estate and further education. And I look after operations across the UK and Ireland and Norway and Denmark, Malta and Bermuda, looking after about 1,300 associates and giving them space in which to work and look after themselves. Moving on to slide 3, our environmental commitment. 2 statements really, and this, our environmental commitment goes back, very shortly after we merged. We started looking at ourselves, and we made some basic statements, and when we moved forward, looking at how we could advance that each year from 2007 onwards, and we are prepared to lead and make efforts and make decisions that support our belief that our business and other businesses, but primarily our business, should do work in the right way. And this year we moved forward during lockdown, during the COVID period, working with Wendy and the team here, and with some others as well. This year we moved forward a commitment, and we are now the only insurance broker that is certified carbon neutral. We have measured, we have analysed, we have recorded, we have reported, and using the BSI PAS 2060 standard, we are happy that the measurement is correct and audited, and we're happy that we have used appropriate carbon offset to achieve a carbon neutral stance. And we produce an annual annual environment report each year, looking at our impact and how we're performing against the targets that we've set ourselves. And we've set long-term targets inside there for reducing our energy consumption. And we were tracking on downwards in line with our targets prior to shutdown, and we're measuring it. And obviously, this shutdown has continued to contribute to a reduction in CO2, but the environment commitment is more than just energy. So, Wendy, if you just want to pop on slide 4, COVID didn't stop our commitments, but we did decide to send all of our staff home 1 week before the government did. We had so many people that were coming back to us, and we recognised that COVID and business, it's about people, where it's about supporting and looking after our people, and we took every effort to remain in close contact with our associates during the initial period of the lockdown, and obviously continuing on through till now, with giving them support and guidance on how to work at home and how to adapt what they were doing at home, to give them the essential management support to let them know that what they were doing right, or how they could adapt it. But far more importantly, simple things. We offered everybody who was working at home a new personal chair for them at home, so they could actually sit down on something other than a dining room table with a dining chair, and give them additional screens, because working on laptops is comfortable for a little while, but not for a long time. So it's sending them home an appropriate screen to work with them, to enable their working at home to be a success. And when we sent those to them in June, we didn't know how long the lockdown was going to carry on for. We just took the immediate decision to support people at home. It is management support, it is training, it's help, but it's also physical things to help people do their roles successfully, and tried to support people in their learning at home how to use software that some of them had never touched, in terms of trying to achieve video meetings with between themselves and also with clients. Supporting clients is fine when you can see them, when you can talk to them, but getting through when the IT teams have a habit of setting security standards that sometimes you can't get through and run a meeting. I've listed 6 there. There are lots and lots of video apps that we had to provide support for and give people guidance on. So if you can move on to slide 5, please, Wendy. We put in place protocols to enable our phones to be diverted to mobiles, and our main switchboard was dealt with by a telephone team working from home, and associates could access their diary and workplace information whilst remaining GDPR compliant at all times. And all of our incoming post was scanned and sent on to the business units and associates in the London office. and we published supporting videos to people via YouTube. We used open communications back from associates via any route that they wanted to come back with comments on. And we gave key information to people about time management, stress management, how to deal with mental health. We have completed an online survey and a questionnaire for all associates about how to understand from them what they were concerned about working from home, about their concerns as a manager of people that are working from home or part of a team that was working from home, and about how they could support themselves and return to working in the office, because we asked the questionnaire prior to the government in August moving on to the returning to work cycle that started in August and continued until mid-September. When if you just bounce on, so during July we reviewed that feedback and we took preparations in place to enable a limited number to return into the office, where we'd had as was mentioned by Joel, we had a skeleton of people working in the office just to keep the background going. We'd made the workplace COVID safe, offered associates in July the opportunity to come into the office, because a lot of them, the feedback was people were fed up looking at wallpaper behind this computer screen. So we gave them the chance to come in, but only if they were able to get in without using public transport. We moved that on one stage later into August, when the government relaxed the rules and said you could work in the office and return to work. We offered the opportunity for everyone to come into the office just one day during August, but vulnerable people had childcare issues, personal health issues, fine, carry on working from home. There's no pressure on people. Everything that we've done was done on a voluntary basis to try and just help people adapt what they were doing, work at home or work in the office. When you're going to jump on to number 7, our environment program continued, very importantly. But our environment program was reporting and measurements tied to our financial year, 30th of April. Normally that meant gathering data in May to produce the environment report. The pandemic and lockdown threw that into a cocked hat, but it didn't change the legislation. We still had to meet SECR. We had to measure and report against our targets for our own performance requirements under 14,001, where we're certified on that as well. We to continue in meeting our commitment to improve each year. For those of you that know CDP, we make a CDP disclosure, and we had to pull that all into our environment report during lockdowns. We're doing all this from home, with all the landlords being at home as well, because all of our buildings are leased. We don't own any building. So Wendy, if you just want to jump on to the last one. So we did achieve during lockdown 2 separate things. We made our first SECR report. We are an LLP, so that's what brought us into the scheme. Previously, it was limited companies and stock market listed, but as an LLP, we're brought into it. I have had to redact it out of there in terms of the actual numbers, because it mentions turnover numbers, and we don't republish our turnover numbers by the business units in London, which it's 1.8 billion worldwide in dollars. But far more importantly, in terms of something that was our choice, we moved forward and achieved carbon neutrality, working with Wendy and her team in August, so that we offset everything that we, besides achieving reductions in all of our targeted areas in our environment program, we still have carbon left over as what we generate. We've measured it and we've accredited the carbon neutrality with Wendy. The key things from us, from the point of view of COVID is awful. It's something that's unique to our working lives, hopefully over the next maybe 12 to 18 months, and hopefully the situation will move forward. But in terms of environment, you've got a commitment there, probably as a business. Headwinds may come up, but please have an environment program that's strong enough to survive the headwinds of whatever comes along. Be prepared to innovate and change course, and try and find alternative ways of delivering the commitments you've already made. So Wendy, thank you. I'm trying to shorten it down. So
Mike, thank you so much for an amazing presentation. And I think, you know, some of the elements there throughout this morning, particularly with yours, are about innovation around people. You know, when we think about sustainability, we think about the 3 pillars, and we have to think about the people at all times. That's come through loud and clear, I think, from all of the presentations today. I know that we've run a few minutes late, but if there are any burning questions, and I know 1 or 2 of them have been answered in the chat panel just now. If there are any questions, I will take a couple of questions for the presenters now, please. Let me see. Actually, whilst you're right, I might pick up on the issues there actually about the homework footprint and where that gets accounted with. And I think those are the issues there on scope 3 assessments. Joel, if we can just have a quick clarity on where the homework footprint would sit in a carbon footprint report, if that's to be seen there. If you could unmute, please.
So because home workers are their utilities are operated by themselves, so the people working from home is technically their footprint. So it would be for where you're burning natural gas, that would be the scope 1 emission of the home worker, but the scope 3 emission of the business. And the electricity would be scope 2 emission of the home worker, but a scope 3 emission of the business. Does that answer your question?
Okay, Joel, thank you for that. Thank you. Right, obviously a question there. I think some hints there about ESOS phase 3, which I actually will take on. We don't know for sure whether ESOS phase 3 is going to happen. Obviously, ESOS originates from the EU's energy directive. Obviously, we're going to leave the EU at the end of the year, apparently, and it is on the UK stature book. So we're working on the basis that ESOS phase 3 is happening. So things such as the energy assessments and such like will be happening. Obviously, that's running at the same time as streamlined energy and carbon reporting. I do have a question for Jack that actually was being posed offline from here. Jack, if you could unmute. Obviously, a lot of people are from different areas. How typical would Basingstoke be of a large town across the UK? And you can take that question in any shape or form, just to give a sense of how that represents what's happening in other parts of the UK right now. Jack, over to you, please.
Yeah, so it's a difficult question to know for sure. I mean, I think certainly not unique, but one of the interesting things about Basingstoke and Deane as a borough is the mix of urban and rural space. We've got a sizable town with a significant proportion of the population of the whole borough is based within the town centre, and it's not that big an area, and then it's surrounded by quite a substantial area of sort of rural area around it. So I don't know how many local authorities have quite that kind of mix, and also obviously that lends both benefits and challenges in terms of how do we encourage economic growth, but ensure that we are continuing to protect things that matter to people in the local area, versus the sort of some of the benefits that having such a rural area can provide in terms of the environment. And actually, it's a very attractive thing for bringing in new people to live in Basingstoke, new businesses to work here. It's one of the assets that really features highly on why they want to be here. It's because of that access to the rural locations. So yeah, it's difficult to know. I mean, typically as a new town, we're compared to places like Milton Keynes, etc., which I think is fair on some comparisons, but I think we're quite different in the makeup of the whole borough, really, to those places. Don't know if that helped.
Jack, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think a question as well that I have had offline here for Mike Kerridge, please, from Lockton, is about the mix really that he sees. And this may not be necessary for Lockton, but what you see for the office admin-based businesses, what you think that the mix between home-based working and office-based working will be going forward. Mike, if you could unmute, please, and share your view on this.
I mean, it's a very, very good question, and I don't think anybody has an answer to it. If you were to ask an architect, they may give an answer that says it will be an adapted workplace in the office that people will go back to. If you ask a different group of people, they'll say that more people will be working from home. From the professional services type environment, and if you look at the evidence of the people that are using transport that Jack was putting forward in his presentation, and from my own personal experience looking at where people come in from Petersfield and from Guildford and from Woking on the train that I catch into London, the professional services people are voting, it would appear, with their feet and staying at home, and it also it's a society thing. Yeah, people feel guilty about being at home, and people feel equally guilty to their family about travelling to work. So I think there's no one hard and fast answer to say what is the percentage going to be, how is it going to change. Yes, it's going to change. How we work will be probably the key word, and you know, as much as people hate the phrase the new normal, I don't like the word agile, but there's not another better description at the moment. People will be working in an agile way where their contract of employment still says they're based in the office, but the office organisation lets them work from home 2 or 3 days a week. But then people find if they're coming into the office for 2 days a week and they're commuting, the cost of commuting, there is no season ticket that does 2 days a week. And it's as expensive to come in for 2 as it is for 5. But people at the moment, in terms of over the next 12 months, what are people going to do? I think they're going to continue to make quite a large effort to stay working from home until they're happy that transport is safe. The biggest feedback we've had is people are happy their home environment is safe, and they're happy that the office environments can be safe and the working environments can be safe. It's that gap in between where you've got unenforced diligence on the transport system that give rise to fear, which is why you've got 15% transport numbers of people catching trains into Waterloo. So how are people going to work? What's the numbers going to be? Over the next year, probably between 35 and 40% of the people in professional services, I think, will be in the office at some point during the week. In terms of the actual volume on site, that might be 95% of your people coming to the office at some point, but at any one time, the peak number of people on site to maintain COVID safe, probably around 35 to 40%. Sorry for a slightly long answer.
Thank you so much there, Mike. Huge thanks to our excellent presenters today. Also, these sessions only take place because of the sponsorship from the 3 local councils, Basingstoke and Deane, Hart and Rushmore. So thank you so much for your support with that. And all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for your participation and questions today, and wishing you a very good weekend.
We hope to return to a mixture of virtual and live events as we go forward into 2021. If you'd like to see particular topics covered by us, please contact me. Or indeed, if you'd like to give a presentation, please let me know. We'd love to hear from you.